Hey everyone, how's it going? Coming to y'all with yet another knife review. This one is a 2-for-1, and it's on some new knives from Schrade. For those of you who didn't see the video, Schrade actually sent me some product for the purpose of testing and review, so these were provided to me for the purpose of review. However, my thoughts are entirely my own. One of my stipulations was that I would be allowed to actually use them and give my honest thoughts on them, and that's what I'm doing here today. I have both carried and used both of these knives, albeit not for months on end, because I kind of want to get the review out there before then, but I have done quite a bit of extensive testing on these to kind of simulate additional pocket carry and use. And I have actually, carried them in the pocket to see how they feel when carried around, so I do feel like I have enough data to do the review. And these are two knives from their beta series. Okay, so these are US-made knives in their middle-of-the-road price range. If you don't know, they have three lines of knives now. You have the Delta class, which are made in China and Taiwan. Then you have the Beta class, which can be made in countries such as Italy, Germany, the United States, Japan. And then you have the Alpha class, which is exclusively US made with only US materials. So these are right in the middle of the price range kind of realm. The Beta class knives tend to sell for between $50 and $80-ish. And these are both in that $50 ballpark, okay? $50 for the full size, $46 for the compact version here. And I think a lot of people out there will be hyped just to be able to get an American-made knife for under $50 or at $50, if I'm being completely honest. So let's go ahead and jump into this and give my honest thoughts on these two folding knives. Starting with the packaging, as they were provided by Schrade, they just came in these two little pouches, these little kind of satin-esque knife pouches, which is interesting because the Delta series knife they provided came in its own clamshell, and the Alpha class knives came in actual boxes. And they also had these on the knives, but inside the boxes. So I'm guessing that the Beta class knives don't have proper packaging, or if they do, for some reason it just wasn't provided to me. But this is what you're going to be looking at. In my experience with what I was given by Schrade themselves, just a simple satin drawstring pouch. Nothing crazy, but very simple. If you're not big on keeping your packaging, at least you can find other uses for these. So enough with that. Let's get into the knives themselves. And these are very interesting knives because they are striving to be as thin as humanly possible. You might be able to see this. They are incredibly thin-handled knives. And if I had to hazard a guess as to why they wanted to make these the way they did, it would be to make them as unobtrusive in the pocket as humanly possible. So when you're carrying around a very thick knife, something that has a very wide handle profile, or not wide, that would be this way, but very thick handle profile, you feel it on your person every minute of every day. And let me go ahead and grab something. Well, this isn't a knife. I think it does represent what I'm talking about. Here's the Ozark Trail 15-in-1 multi-tool from Walmart. This has a pocket clip on it, which I never use. I always carry this in a belt sheath. But when you have something this thick, you notice it. Every minute of every day, you feel this. Whereas something super thin like this, you don't really feel it bumping around inside your pocket, or at least that is the end goal. How did it actually work in practice? Well, I can tell you, they are very unobtrusive. In my carry, I never really noticed I had this one on my person. Occasionally I would with this one because of the wider profile, but it was still very, very unobtrusive. So the super thin handle does work in that way. To really start the review, I'm going to start where I always like to, and that is in the blades. So we have the same shape and steel on both of these. So on the full size, we're looking at a 3-inch blade. On the compact, we're looking at a 2.4-inch blade. But either way, we're looking at a blade made out of D2 steel with a flat grind from about the midsection down in this reverse tanto modified Wharncliffe shape. And what I can tell you is that this shape has its absolute uses, and there are things that it just does not do all that well, which is something that is no surprise to longtime knife users. Okay, a Wharncliffe blade is an excellent utility blade. It is great for kind of flat cutting tasks, although the flipper, in my opinion, did get in the way of that a little bit because you can't get it completely surface. You had to kind of come to the edge of something to get that flipper tang out of the way. So possibly a bit of a drawback to the blade design there. But they are great for more utilitarian tasks. I do not find them to be exceptional as package openers because the tips are obviously not as fine as something like a clip point, spear point, or drop point blade can be, but it is still, adequately pokey. It will get the job done. It's just not its strongest role. One area where both of these knives excelled was slicing. These things are absolutely outstanding slicers, making short work of cardboard and double thickness cardboard, as I later tested these on. And they went through it like it was no problem whatsoever. These things are amazing slicers, which for a blade shape like this is honestly not surprising, okay? As I mentioned before, you're looking at a D2 steel there. Well, if I don't bump my camera too much, flip it over, you see made in the USA. Then we have what I'm guessing is a patent number or serial number on the other side. So 3-inch blade here, 2.4-inch blade here. These are both very well suited to the EDC roll. However, I will note that I think the 3-inch blade on the full-size version is kind of small considering we have a 4.5-inch handle here. So the blade-to-handle ratio is a bit off. The smaller version here, the compact, I think is much better. 2.4-inch blade, 3.5-inch handle. We get a much more one-to-one. In terms of how the edge held up on the D2 steel here, I found it to perform adequately. As you know, in terms of D2, I've used a lot of D2 at this point, even though it is admittedly not a steel I prefer. I live in a very high humidity environment, and as a result, D2 has rust issues where I live, so I do have to be careful to wipe the blades off and keep them oiled. However, in terms of edge retention, I find these to perform right in the middle of the road of D2. Okay, I've had D2 knives that performed much worse, but I have had D2 knives that have performed better than Schrade's formulation of D2 here. Okay, if I'm being completely honest, actually I'll grab one real quick. Here is a Gonzo that I have a review to come on, and the D2 on this has actually been the best performing D2 I've used yet. This has outperformed much, much more expensive D2. And so, you know, I've used D2 of all different makes and productions. I find Schrades to be... Oh, I keep bumping the tripod, I'm sorry. I find Schrades to be adequate, albeit not outstanding. There we go. So does that mean I dislike it? No, not at all. I mean, I like it about the same as I would any D2. I would prefer a stainless steel personally. But I did find that this performed adequately well. Its edge held up just fine. It was able to touch back up very nicely to get to a super hair-popping razor's edge. So I don't really have too many issues with the blade, even if the steel is not my preference. Deployment and lockup on these. Go ahead and close these so I can show you. They are flipper designs. And the deployment is very smooth and very fast. I mean, these things come out with very little effort. The large one, not quite as fast as the small one, but... Oh, slipping off the flipper there. Still very, very quick. And the flipper design is a bit odd. It is jimped, but the jimping is not the most effective at grabbing my thumb. And I find the flipper tang to be a bit excessively large. Okay, I'll bring in that Gonzo again by way of comparison. You can see this more narrow tab. I find that to be a bit of a better approach than with this super large flipper tab. All right, not to say that this doesn't work. It's just not, in my opinion, the most practical, but I get why they did it. They wanted everything on here to have a very broad plan form. They wanted it to kind of match the overall design of the knife itself. But they do come out nice and fast. I did not check to see if these are riding on bearings or washers. They feel like they are on bearings. The action does feel very bearing-like, so I would assume that these are riding on steel bearings. It's definitely not ceramic, but it is still smooth. Okay, the lock mechanism on these is a frame lock. You can see a very thin frame lock because we're working with a very thin-handled knife. And I have noticed that occasionally, not common, but very rarely, I will get this frame lock sticking a little bit, which can make it a little uncomfortable to disengage because the thin frame kind of bites into your thumb the whole time you're pushing the frame over. Not a huge deal, but something I did want to note, and it's kind of a drawback that comes with having a super thin handle design. Centering on these two knives, you can see definitely listing to that right-hand side. Not quite rubbing, but very close. What about on the compact? This one's much better. This one's almost perfect. So centering not perfect on these, which is interesting to me because I've never been a centering snob. I've never really cared as long as it doesn't rub the liner. But I know a lot of people do, and you can get much more affordable knives that have much better centering than these. So it's kind of an interesting thing to note that the new Schrade hasn't quite nailed that yet. And if I'm being completely honest, that's an issue that I have with, I believe, almost every knife that Schrade has sent me, as well as their Delta species Landshark that I have a review to come on. So, you know, maybe a bit of a disappointment for some out there that this does not have the overall perfect fit and finish that you may expect from a US-made knife, but also consider that this is only a $50 knife. And, you know, while you can get $20 and $30 Chinese knives that do have perfect centering, a lot of people out here who are watching this who would buy these knives would never buy those knives in the first place because they want US-made knives, and $50 is a very affordable price tag for an American-produced knife. Now, I have to be completely honest, these are not the most ergonomic knives in the world, and that is part of the nature of being such a thin-handled knife design. So whenever you're pulling these out and using them for very light tasks, it's honestly fine. If you're not bearing down super hard on these handles and you're just zipping something open, these are perfectly adequate. But if you're doing hard use work with these and you're really bearing down on them, these handles are extremely uncomfortable. Okay, they bite in really aggressively into the hand. They tried to round these stainless steel handles here, but it didn't quite work because you can still feel the interior edge of the handle slabs. And the reason that is interesting to me is because here I have another knife. This is from Taylor Brand's Schrade, the old company. It's interesting because now it's been under 3 different ownerships, but the company before the current company who makes these, this is also a very thin-handled knife. In fact, I'll go ahead and compare this with the Slyte Compact, and you can see very comparable thinness on these handles. However, despite the very thin nature of this one, I can bear down on this all day and it's not uncomfortable because they've done a better job contouring and rounding these handle slabs than what has been done with the Slyte and the Slyte Compact. Okay, maybe you can see a bit sharper, a bit more angular there. Bring in this other knife over here, and you can see a bit of a difference between the way that they designed these knives. So you can get very thin-handled knives that are more ergonomic than these, but Schrade just hasn't quite figured that out yet, or new Schrade hasn't quite figured that out yet. Now again, for light EDC use, just pulling these out to quickly zip something open, it's absolutely fine. But if you're really bearing down on these to use them, I have to be honest, they are extremely uncomfortable. And so these do not make very good hard use knives. These are very much light use only knives. Now, another upside to these being so thin, however, is that they are incredibly lightweight. So in addition to being so thin you don't notice them in your pocket, they are so light you don't really notice them in your pocket. We're looking at 3.2 ounces for the large one, 1.9 for the small. So they are extremely lightweight. You really, really don't feel these things on you. So there's always a plus with the, take the good with the bad, take the positive with the negative. There are trade-offs that you make. So maybe the lack of ergonomics for hard use is fine for you because you don't plan on using these knives very hard in the first place. We do have a pocket clip oriented for right-hand tip-up only on both of these knives. It is a loop-over design, moderately deep carry, not as deep carry as it could be, but it buries most of the knife in there. Not reversible to the left-hand side, which I personally dislike. In my opinion, every single knife in the world should have the option for left-handed carry because lefties need love too. I will go ahead and show you how these carry though. So here is the full size, and then over here will be the compact, and they carry just like so. Again, they bury the majority of the knife into the pocket. As far as the clip design itself, I think it's fine. You can see we have a decent amount of space there between the clip and the handle slab. If you have super thick pants, you may have a hard time getting this to nest fully. These are button screws, so they're not recessed. That may also cause problems with thicker fabric. However, I do like that the end of the clip here is not flared up, and I have not noticed these snagging on anything. Tension is moderate. Okay, I'll bring in the compact to show you as well. Exact same design. Also, tension is moderate, so I think the clips are fine. However, I would like to see these offered with a left-handed carry option. Just tap some screws over here and let lefties have the chance to carry this as well. Additionally, for deep carry loop over clips, I always like to see a lanyard hole. We don't have a lanyard hole on either of these, so if you wanted to attach a lanyard, you kind of have to tie it around that standoff pillar there. The compact, a little harder to do because we have a closer 1-to-1 ratio. So I would definitely like to see a lanyard hole offered on these, just to make them a little easier to extract from the pocket, as I've always found deep carry clips to not be the quickest extraction method. All right, price tags again, we're looking at about $50 here, $46 here. Those are the prices on Knife Center. These are, at the time of filming, available for pre-order, so they're not quite out yet. And what I'm going to go ahead and say is I think that they are good knives. Okay, if anyone's out there watching this and thinks, okay, I've mentioned a lot of negatives, do not take that the wrong way. because there's also a lot going on that is good with these knives. Again, most people are going to love the D2 steel. So many people love D2 that they're going to find that to be a huge plus. Made in the USA is going to be a very big bonus to people. Being only around $50 a piece for US-made products is going to be very affordable for the majority of people out there who like US-made gear. The fact that they are so thin and light is going to be a huge bonus to many people who are watching every ounce they carry and don't really want to feel their knife bumping into them all day long. The loop-over clips are going to be a big plus for many people because they like that super deep conceal. So when you add all that together, that is a very large list of pros. But with that still comes a list of cons. You know, you are looking at imperfect blade centering. You are looking at a lack of ergonomics. You are looking at being non-lefty friendly. And it's kind of up to you as the consumer to determine whether or not that is worth it, okay? These are stainless steel handles. I believe I mentioned that already, and they do have this really nice kind of look to them. There's no traction on them, but they are very nicely kind of stone-washed or tumbled finished. Don't know if I mentioned that. They are attractive-looking knives, in my opinion, but it's up to you if they are worth your hard-earned money. For me, I think the value is decent. I don't think the value is outstanding, but I definitely don't think the value is bad. I think you get a fair amount of knife for the money. However, they are not my cup of tea. They are definitely not my preference. So, hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. Hope you enjoy the rest of your day. And until next time, peace, and I'll see you later.